Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Iambic Scribe, dedicated to all things writing. So today we're going to be going over show, don't tell. This is one of the most important concepts in descriptive writing. I called it the most important simply because it encompasses all other concepts, and we will go into detail and separate videos for some of the stuff I will mention today. So this video is also going to be including a writing challenge at the end. It's the first writing challenge that I'm going to pose here. So we'll get into that later. And as always, you guys can follow along. You can grab your notebook or, whatever. I hope that the previous videos were helpful for you guys. Be sure to check those out. So we're just going to get right into the content here. And as you guys can kind of see, I'm not really one to edit. It just takes way too much time. So I'm going to be going along with you throughout this entire slideshow and adding some things here and there if I feel that it'll be helpful. So the show, don't tell concept. This is pretty much what it is in summary. It is when you are writing descriptively and explaining what is there within the scene or within, just in general, within the information, using things like details, actions, sensory information, which I'll explain later, versus just telling the reader in plain, boring narrative. Okay, so I'll give you plenty of examples later that I created myself. I just kind of typed them up as I went along to demonstrate each of the different themes. So show, don't tell means basically we're showing the reader what is in front of us. So when you open up a book, the only lens that the reader has is the one that you're showing them, okay? So it's very different, obviously, than something like a movie or a TV show where the camera is showing everything. So when you open up the pages of a book, we have to be able to see the world that is actually there in front of us by painting the picture. So that's something that I actually kind of say often, is that you're painting the scene through your words. And I will give you some details as how to do this versus just telling the readers. So this is something that a lot of you probably have noticed from, I'll just call it bad books, okay? There are some books out there that I have seen that just kind of tell. This means that there is no description, that it's just narrative, and that we as the readers are just expected to believe that whatever the writer is saying is what goes. But how are we supposed to know what's there unless they describe it and make us feel it? So we have to be immersed within that world, which leads to basically the idea of the benefits. So there are endless benefits to show, don't tell. It creates life on the page. It shows and paints the world of the novel or the memoir or the whatever it is, the poem, it could be anything. It paints that world by the use of this language and literary techniques that I will get into in further videos. And I feel that it not only creates and paints the world itself, but it also creates emotion. Okay, so that's really what we're doing when we're writing. As I always say, we're writing for passion. We're writing for creation itself. It is such a beautiful art. And so if you guys are not familiar with the show, don't tell concept, think of it as an introductory video, and the golden rule, one of the golden rules that I'll be repeating over and over again, is to let it come naturally through practice. Let it come naturally over time. So anything that we go over, it's going to be difficult to grasp at first, and it's going to be kind of clunky. That's how it was for me when I first started. But once you get into the hang of it, it's going to come to you naturally. Another golden rule, check out my previous video, is that you are channeling versus creating, right? So you are the channel, you are the conduit in a sense, and you're channeling this divinely inspired information, however you want to look at it. I feel it does help to think of it in that way. So again, we're showing the readers, we're describing the scene, we're describing the characters, we're implying things, we're not just stating a sentence. And I'll give you the examples next. But another thing about show, don't tell. Here's a couple of the things that it can demonstrate or it can paint the picture of, right? So we're talking emotions, character or personality or persona, setting, environment, ambiance, things like that, and much more. Pretty much everything within the writing realm. Okay, so let's get an example in, and this will really illustrate the point, just in case what I said to you, what I said first didn't really make much sense or didn't resonate. So let's take a look at an example. The first example that I'm going to go over has to do with emotions, okay? So let's say that you want to portray any type of emotion at all, rather than just writing down that statement. And here's the quote, okay? We're going to show the readers, we're going to demonstrate it with language that you will see quickly within my examples that I wrote, have to do with physical sort of either symptoms or sensations. So here's the first example. So the top example in green here, this is an example of tell. So if you just tell the reader, I felt anxious, or he was nervous, okay? That doesn't really paint them the picture. That doesn't allow them to immerse themselves within the experience of the writing world, okay? So they're not actually there and present. Versus if you were to say instead, we're showing, okay? If you were to say something like this instead, I could feel my stomach drop instantly. The blood drained from my face and hands until I was frozen solid. I was barely breathing. So this right here could demonstrate things like anxiety or fear or, you know, any kind of emotion. It kind of obviously depends on the rest of the context of this. But let's break this down for just a second so that you guys can really get a feel for show, don't tell. So again, here in this top example, this is where we are telling, and that is a pretty ineffective way to make the reader feel or experience anything. So this is I guess this could be considered an advanced topic depending on your ability to channel different emotions. So for example, if you're a person that has felt anxious or nervous, this will be quite easy. It'll come easily to you. But if you've never actually felt that, that's going to take a little bit of research, but we'll get into that in a different video. So this is the example of tell. So this down here is the example of show, where it says here, I could feel my stomach drop instantly. So, you know, you can really use anything that you want. It just kind of depends on, again, the context of your story. But I am using physical symptoms here of anxiety to demonstrate the emotion itself. So I'm painting the picture. Okay, so stomach drop is an example of a physical sensation. And then here, the blood draining from the face and hands. Okay, frozen solid. I was frozen solid to demonstrate the coldness of the body that may happen as a result of anxiety, okay? And then here is just actually saying, this is not necessarily, well, this is more like an action. I was barely breathing, okay? So these are just a couple of examples. So the overall tip, the first tip that you can see here is use physical symptoms, okay? I should probably add that in somewhere here. Okay, so the tip, and you'll see that later on, physical, I can't type in talk ever, physical symptoms. So what I mean by that, physical symptoms is any kind of sensory information. I say symptoms like as if it's like a medical thing, I guess it could be, but yes, this is going to be any kind of sensory information. So here I was talking about physical symptoms of anxiety. It could also be medical symptoms of like physical illness, right? So you're talking about things like nausea instead of just saying he was sick. Okay, so anyway, that is a tip there to use physical symptoms or sensory information. Let's go on to a different emotion. Let's look at anger. Okay, so the tell example, he was angry. Okay, again, if you're just telling the reader he was angry or she was angry or, you know, they looked angry, that's not really telling them much. And imagine if you don't follow that up with anything, the readers are not going to have that experience of anger. They're just going to be told, and that's really not a great immersive experience at all. So I just use this example. This is just a random one I came up with. So it says, he pursed his lips into a thin solid line. His already white knuckles stiffened, fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might explode. So in this example, I'm doing it in first person, which is using the I rather than he, she, or it, which is third person. So this is sort of like a person. So it's like me, the narrator. I'm observing that this person is angry, and the physical sort of demonstration of that is the pursed lips, okay, into a thin solid line, because people usually only do that when they are angry, okay? So again, a more of an advanced tip is that you may want to start to observe people when they're angry, or even look up different things for body language to see what happens when we're angry. That's more advanced, but, you know, maybe in a later video. Okay, so here, his already white knuckles stiffened. So I was using the whole thing about when you're making a fist that this part turns white. And I said that they stiffened. And then here I said fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might explode. So that's a different literary technique. I guess this is sort of like hyperbole in a way, but I'll get into that in a separate video. But it's just my way of almost exaggerating to show that the anger, the fingers gripping the wheel is so tight that it might explode. I mean, obviously that won't really happen, but that's just my way of painting the picture of anger, okay? So clearly, you know, something like anger or anxiety, these types of descriptions can go a million different ways, infinite ways, so you guys will get used to it. So that kind of ties into our writing challenge later on, okay? So I would love to see what you guys come up with for anger. So let's see here. The next emotion, I'm just going to do one more, and this is like a nicer emotion, is peacefulness. Okay, so instead of just saying I was peaceful, so this is a little bit longer. I don't know if you guys can see this as well. So here's my example. I settled back into my chair, taking a long, peaceful sigh. So it's okay to use the actual word, but as long as you back it up. I could hear the birds outside, their song interlaced with the dewy rustle of the trees, probably basking in a freshly golden light. A warmth washed all over me, and for once I closed my eyes and relaxed, sinking into this foreign feeling that I knew wouldn't last forever. So this example goes into a little bit more detail. This is, yes, using a bit of the sensory information. So I said a warmth washed all over me. So that's talking about a physical sensation. And sensory information, sort of like other details of whatever is going on within the senses. I mentioned here the birds, okay? So the birds outside and their song. I mentioned the rustle of the trees. So the reason why I did this was to sort of, again, paint the picture using other peaceful imagery within this example. The very first part here, I settled back into my chair, taking a long, peaceful sigh. That's not exactly a sensory information. That would be more of an action, going back up to our one of our initial slides here. Details, actions, and sensory information. You can use any of these in order to paint the picture, okay? So I was talking about what I was doing, what I was hearing, what I was feeling, and just the overall language that I was using was supporting that emotion of peace. Okay, so for me, these types of details really, they say peace to me. You know, birds and the sunlight and the air, that kind of a thing. So all of that, okay, those were the 3 examples of how we can show different emotions rather than just stating that boring line that doesn't let the reader experience it. So my hope is that through those different examples, you guys were able to feel just a little bit of the emotion, okay? So the way that you can go about doing show, don't tell, you know, you're going to draw from your personal experiences. And again, you can do research and just let it come to you over time. But yes, practice, practice, practice. And I'll talk more about that in the challenge. Okay, so again, we went over how to show different things like nervousness, anxiety, fear. We went over anger and peacefulness. These were just the ones that I chose off the top of my head. So let's go to the next way that you can show and not tell. In the example of setting, okay? So one thing that you really don't want to do, I mean, emotions I feel was the most important one, like hands down, the most important thing to show and not tell. Now setting is of great importance as well, because you don't want to just say to your reader, oh, the garden was beautiful, or, you know, whatever the case is, which I'll give you a couple more examples. You don't want to just it's so flat, you know, like if you just say the phrase, it's so flat, but you want to show them, paint this picture. And this is an easy example if you guys are particularly nature lovers. So if I was to say, just as an example, tulips blazed over the garden in fiery waves. Imagine the difference, you know? Imagine the picture that you're going to paint in the reader's mind if you say something like this versus just the garden was beautiful, boom. Like, it's not saying anything. So this is just, again, whatever came off the top of my head. I was basing this off of something I had written in the past with a lot of garden imagery that had a symbolic reasoning for it. Again, different video. But you can use any example that you want to describe the garden. So you could talk about the, you know, you can talk about the different flowers within the garden. You can talk about the different shapes and designs. And again, this is this is the visual representation, but you can, of course, use any sensory imagery at all. So think of what you are feeling, what you're smelling and tasting and, you know, hearing, anything. Any of the five senses will do to describe the actual scene and the setting, okay? The setting and the environment that the reader is now in, okay? So what would you want the, you know, think of, if you're reading a book, what would you want the writer to describe? You know, you want to get the full picture. Now, again, it comes with practice. It's very tricky to say what to describe and what not to describe. It will have to cover that in later videos, but that does come with practice and pacing, okay? So let's use another example. So instead of saying something like, the house was very old, you can say an exaggeration such as, the house was so old that it looked like it would fall over at the slightest breeze. I think I've heard a phrase like this before. I just pulled it out of my head. That could have already been taken, but this is just, again, using sort of like exaggeration or hyperbole in order to demonstrate the age of the house. So you could take any detail of the house. You could talk about the sound it makes, like maybe it's creaking in the wind. Maybe you can talk about the fading paint on the outside of the house, really anything at all. But again, the whole point is that you are showing the reader. And then I think the last example... Okay, so I use only 2 for setting. So the next couple of examples, well, I only have 2 here, that I will show you has to do with showing or demonstrating a person's character or personality. Now, before we get into the examples, it's okay to just, you know, say certain things in narrative about a person's character because that might be part of the stream of consciousness of the narrator. So we'll just use these 2 examples here that demonstrate character or personality or persona by how the person is within their actions or maybe even their physical appearance or things like that, okay? So instead of saying something like, she was uptight, the way to demonstrate and to show that this person is uptight is by little things that they do. So for example, right here, she was the kind of person who always stood up a little too straight. So here I'm talking about the person's posture and the stiff and rigid posture to demonstrate the fact that she's an uptight person, okay? So certain things like that can demonstrate our inner persona. She never left the house without emergency money, and even her signature was missing a slant. So I don't know if that was a great example, but I'm trying to portray the fact that this person, this character, is uptight and just kind of grade A, what is it called? Grade A personality, you know, whatever, and sort of just rigid in tone, okay? So this is a little bit of a different example. This next example is just showing the opposite effect, and it's a little bit more based off of the details that we can see within the scene. So this is the opposite example. He was a sloppy guy. So instead of saying, okay, he's sloppy, you show us, okay, well, how is he sloppy? Why is he sloppy? So I said, his shirt was wrinkled and untucked. She noticed his uncut fingernails and way past 5 o'clock shadow as he hunched over the doorway, okay? So again, I was using the example of posture here. So a person who is like sloppy or not uptight, you know, maybe they're just total opposite energy there. They might be hunched over instead of standing up straight, you know, and stiff. Now, his physical appearance. So his shirt was wrinkled, it was untucked, he didn't cut his fingernails, he had a way past 5 o'clock shadow to suggest that maybe he was either sloppy or, you know, that's obviously a stereotype here. This is more talking about, like, what are you trying to portray? It's all about the context. So this little paragraph here, or, well, this little excerpt here will depend largely on the rest of the description of the character. But this description is trying to demonstrate that he is either sloppy or something else. It might not necessarily be sloppy, but it's giving us some hints that he could be. Okay, so I gave you the tip before to use the physical symptoms or physical sensations. Another thing is using descriptive words. So that one I will cover probably in a different video where we will talk about things like either vocabulary or choosing the right descriptive word. I'll go over things like simile, like I did in some of these other examples, but remember to not overdo it, and remember the golden rule of practicing over time and letting it come natural to you, okay? Naturally over time. And what else? Okay, so I do have the writing challenge for you guys, but before I go into that, let's just do a brief recap, okay? So we want to show the reader instead of tell them. We want to paint the picture. We want to use very sometimes like finely tuned details. We want to show actions. We want to show the subtle things. If you're an advanced writer or intermediate writer, you want to show like the subtle little things that will help to suggest the tone or the themes that we're looking for. Sensory information, physical symptoms, any kind of senses information, the five senses, imagery, things like that, versus just telling them in like a short sort of phrase or sentence. Okay. It does create the entire world of your writing, and it shows different things like emotions, which are, in my opinion, the most important. It gets to demonstrate who the character is without just expecting us to believe you. We have to show it. We have to see it for ourselves, and setting an ambiance or environment. Okay, so I had a lot of fun writing the emotion ones. I really did. So I hope that you guys have fun with that. So let's get to the writing challenge, which is, I don't even know if this is a real word. I just stuck that in there. Fictionize your life. So here is the challenge. I would love for you guys to just write a short example. It could even be a couple of sentences. Just write a short example where you are practicing the notion of show, don't tell. So this is where you can practice describing or showing either a past or present emotion, setting, person, or anything else that you would like. So make it simple. You know, the whole point of this is to get the ball rolling. So maybe my recommendation is to try to describe something that actually did inspire you. Okay, so you may not want to talk about something boring, mundane, or something that just didn't really strike you at all, but try to describe something that did inspire you or move you in some way, like maybe a person that you were attracted to, or maybe it was a very moving memory, or maybe it was like a very beautiful scene that you were moved by in some shape or form. So that is the writing challenge. You can describe settings such as your safe space or something, you know, within your own home, or it could be someplace in nature. So really, you know, it's unlimited here, but I would love to see you guys' examples of this. You know, feel free to write down in the comments just a short example of this challenge, fictionizing your life, where you are showing and not telling. I'm excited for that, to see if any of you guys actually do comment down below. Okay, so I did include one reference here. It's just this website that I did take a look at, and I liked their examples a lot, so I will link that down in the description if you guys want. And be sure as well to like, comment, subscribe to this channel. You can check out my other channel. I have it listed in the about, just in case you happen to not be coming from there. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I really would love to hear from you. And as usual, in the description box, I am going to have an excerpt of my own. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.